Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, readers, and welcome to episode 39 of Fully Booked. I'm your host, Natalie, and today's episode is going to be my May reading wrap-up, and I really have to say, this episode might be a little shorter than my last few wrap-ups, because when I looked back at all the books I read this past month, I realized that majority of the books I read were for other planned episodes, whether it was my TBR episodes or just other future themed episodes. So hopefully you guys will get to enjoy maybe a shorter episode today, although I know some of you probably enjoy the longer episodes and getting to hear me yap about every single book that I've read, but I will admit the wrap-ups have been getting a little bit long. But anyways, before we actually get into each review and all the monthly highlights and all of that, I just want to ask, how are you guys doing today? I know I always wish you guys well at the end of each episode, but I realized that I never ask at the beginning of each episode, and maybe it feels or seems a bit strange because it's not like you guys are here with me live, sitting in front of me, or even like on the phone, and we can go back and forth and talk. But I guess I just like to know how you guys are doing, and I guess just to encourage you and remind you that we are a little community here on the podcast, and we can, engage and talk about, all sorts of things, whether it's book related or not. So I hope you guys are good wherever you are. And I'm also curious to know, how is the weather where you guys are today, or how has it been lately? Because let me tell you, this past month of May has just kind of been out of whack, if I'm going to be honest. I feel like majority of the time in the past, May is that nice kind of transition month where the temperature slowly starts to increase, the sun is out and shining more. I feel like March to April is like a bit more when we get the rainy season, and then May it kind of starts to get nice outside. You can go outside with a light jacket or sometimes with no jacket at all when it gets really hot in the afternoon, and that was just not the case this past May. I feel like we only had, honestly, a couple nice days here and there on the weekends that were sunny, and the whole rest of the month was cloudy and raining so much, which I know it's good for the plant and for the earth in general to water things and for things to grow, but for us humans, it was not very enjoyable, and it was not putting me in a good spring mood. Let's just say that. Also, another completely random note, I guess for me, I've been watching a couple more Australian YouTubers or booktubers lately, and I totally realized how much, I guess, content creators kind of cater their content seasonally to the northern hemisphere, and constantly talk about the change in seasons and that cycle, but only in relation to a certain part of the world. And it's kind of weird to see on the other side of the world that they're about to go into winter and that the temperature's dropping, and then they're kind of catering their reading and other activities to their change in season. So actually, if you are on the other side of the hemisphere, equator, whatever, then I hope you are still enjoying yourself even if you are going into those cooler months. And actually, if you are from a different part of the world or wherever you're listening from right now, I'd love to hear. I'm always very curious. I've said it multiple times, I know, and I do assume that honestly most of you listening are from Canada or the US, but if you are listening from another part of the world, I would really love to know. Anyways, let's now actually get into the monthly highlights for May. So to recap, I read 7 books in total, which seems to be pretty standard for the past couple of months of reading. In addition, I read 5 out of my 6 monthly hopefuls. Although I do want to note here, I almost read all of my monthly hopefuls this past month, except that there is one book that I did not end up finishing, and unfortunately, I'm still in the middle of it right now, and it's probably going to end up in my June reading wrap-up at this rate. And actually, from the books that I'm going to end up listing, you guys will probably figure out shortly which book that was. If you also follow along on my Instagram and when I post my monthly hopefuls. But anyways, So other than that, two of the books that I read were from my spring TBR, and one book was from my summer TBR, which is pretty impressive that I got an early start. But I do have to say, that book was a pretty highly anticipated release for me, so it's not really a surprise that I ended up getting to it technically before the start of summer. And finally, I had no DNFs, which is probably the biggest achievement this past month, because I think this is the first month so far in 2025 that I have not had a DNF, because I think even last month I had one DNF, which was still pretty good for me. But to have no DNFs has been, my goal. It's been my ideal, month to month in my reading journey. So we finally did that this month, which was good. But yeah, all in all, a pretty good reading month. And before we get into some full-length reviews for a couple of the books that I read, again, noting that a lot of books are going to be discussed in upcoming episodes, I'm just going to name some of those books that, again, I'm not going to go into full detail. So the books that I did complete in the month of May, or some of them, are Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune, A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang, and The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. But with all that being said, let's actually get into the rest of the books that I read in May. Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review, as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially, as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to talk about in today's wrap-up is Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone, which I ended up rating 4.5 stars, and I gave it 1.75 chili peppers. Now, I have to say, this was my first Cara Bastone novel, and I was really pleasantly surprised and delighted at this book. I even wrote down in my initial thoughts that this might be a new favorite romance author, like along the lines of Annabelle Monaghan kind of feel. I just felt this storyline overall was so natural, and there was such a natural progression as well between Lenny and Miles and their relationship. I was going to say that this one actually felt like a friends to lovers, which it's so rare. But this one, you actually saw the two main characters going through their everyday lives, being involved in each other's lives platonically, and then just kind of with the passage of time, as well as just all the quality time and bonding that happens in this story. They just slowly start to fall for each other. It's not like insta-lovey, lusty, or, any other kind of trope that you're finding in most romance books nowadays. And it was just such a breath of fresh air. The way I felt like they talked in this book, like their dialogue, it's almost as if I was just having a real conversation like with one of my own friends, or vice versa, my friends talking with me. So yeah, I just really enjoyed, honestly, just how natural this book felt. I don't know if I have time to pull it up right now, but I think there's just like a chapter somewhere in the very middle of the book where Miles uses the phrase "promise me sunshine." I just felt the way it was inserted just in like kind of this mundane sort of moment, but he's promising to just be there for Lenny as she's going through her grief, and all of this stuff was so cute. I kind of just love when authors do that. Like the title's just kind of thrown in, I guess not randomly, but it's just kind of thrown in the middle of the book just like that. And I'm so sorry, I've been blabbing and I haven't even said what this book is about. To try to put it shortly, we're focused in on our FMC Lenny at first, who gets this, I guess, babysitting job for a friend of a friend, or she's referred to them by her last employer. So she's working for this single mom. I'm so sorry, her name's escaping me right now. But yeah, for single mom and taking care of her daughter, and Miles is the daughter's uncle, so that's how they initially meet. And yeah, Lenny's just kind of doing these types of jobs, gigs, because she's grieving the loss of her best friend. It's been a couple months, but she's still, just really mourning and going through the whole process. And Miles has also been through his own share of grief, and that is how they initially start bonding. And he offers to just be there for her, help her through the grief process, and honestly just learning how to live and enjoy life overall again, and to have permission and that it's okay to keep on living even after someone you love dearly has passed away. The only other note I want to make was that I think it was just slightly disappointing for me because this book was basically closed door because they're actually friends for literally maybe 80% of the book or something, majority of the story. And then all of a sudden, in the very last bit of the book, we get this scene. And the scene was kind of written in an awkward way. It wasn't entirely bothersome, but I don't know why it's a little bit weird to read about spice scenes written in that way. It felt kind of visceral. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it exactly. So yeah, it's my only thing. And also that I would have preferred that scene to not be there because then this book would have been completely closed door. Needless to say, I enjoyed this book, I enjoy this author, and I am definitely convinced now to go pick up Ready or Not after this. Okay, so the second book that I ended up reading in the month of May was 10 Words to Live by Jen Wilkin. This is a Christian nonfiction book that basically goes over the 10 Commandments as written in the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. So, a note that I made, this is the fourth book that I've read by Jen Wilkin, so if you guys can't tell, she is a favorite Christian author of mine, and I would highly recommend her to anyone. Now, I find that most people, Christian and not Christian, kind of tend to take the 10 Commandments at their face value, that's to say, very literally, and so I really liked how this book took each one of the 10 Commandments and really reframed it for the modern Christian and showed the true heart, or rather God's heart, behind each of the commandments. For me personally, it just gave me a lot of fresh perspective. The one note I do want to make is that I wouldn't necessarily recommend this book or her other books for newer Christians, as while I personally love her writing style, it does tend to get deeply rooted in theology, and I feel like the way she writes might be a little bit confusing for newer Christians, where you're already trying to learn so many new concepts, principles, and things in general about the Christian faith. But that's not to say that you cannot read this book if you are a newer Christian. Just know, though, that you are going to be challenged. Alright, so the next book that I read in May was Insurgent, which is the sequel to Divergent. And I ended up rating this 4 stars, and I gave it 1 chili pepper again for spice. So, while I still enjoyed the sequel, I was a little disappointed overall on this reread. I just feel like there was so much potential for continued world building in the sequel, as well as overall character and plot development, particularly for Triss. And this book just kind of fell flat for me. I felt like there were just a lot of passing scenes in this book where not much was happening, and it wasn't keeping my attention as much as the first book was, although it was similar to the first book where there was a lot of action right near the very end of the book, and we do get this big reveal, which I slowly remembered the further I got into the book, and that was pretty exciting to reread. But otherwise, the book overall, again, did not develop as much as I thought it was going to. I think I mentioned it a little bit maybe in my last review, that obviously Triss kind of acts like a 16-year-old girl, but I did like her as an FMC, but I did think this time around in this book, her immaturity came through a bit more, and I was kind of questioning things she was like saying and doing throughout the book. And I do understand she's supposed to be 16, but considering she's also divergent, she's kind of like, I don't know, some outsider or special in this world. I just thought there was going to be a little more to her character, or at least more development to her character in this story, which just didn't end up happening. There also wasn't as much romance in this book as I remembered, or at least I think the movie just emphasized the romance a lot more than the book did. But I will say, well, if you guys can't tell, I was disappointed. I do still want to reread the final book so I can fully form my conclusion on this series. Alright, so it's now time for what has probably become my favorite section of the wrap-up episode, and that is the best versus worst pick of the month. Now, just another disclaimer again that I'm not going to be talking about these two books in full length because they are both going to be in upcoming episodes, which is kind of disappointing because at least the first book I'm going to talk about, I have so many positive feelings about, and that is A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang, which I ended up rating 4.75 stars. So I guess all I'm going to say about this one for now is that if you really love standalone fantasies, or if you're looking for one, because standalones in fantasy are pretty hard to find, if you love historical retellings or books with historical fiction storytelling, then you are going to love this book. Oh, and if you also love anything to do with, I guess, East Asian legends and myths, I think this is one that you would really enjoy picking up. Yeah, the writing was so exquisite in this one. Like, every single detail and, aspect that she wrote about in the storyline, the setting, was just so rich and not quite like, I guess, your typical, like, fantasy book that you would pick up nowadays. I just enjoyed it so much. It was a breath of fresh air, and while it was out of my comfort zone for sure, I enjoyed reading this one so much. Oh, and this is also a great fantasy read if you like no spice. And the book is technically labeled as YA, like if you look it up on Goodreads, but I would personally say it's more new adult because the characters are all in their early 20s, or I think our FMC was like 19 or something like that. So to me, I would personally consider it, and it read more as new adults. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about in today's episode is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, which I ended up rating this one 3.5 stars. This one was definitely my most highly anticipated but disappointing read of the month, and probably in general, because this book is, I feel like, fairly popular overall. It's one of those books that sold, I think, over like hundreds of millions of copies by now, because it has been around for a while. It's technically was originally published in 1980 something, and there's been multiple editions published since the original edition came out. I feel like this is one I've been wanting to pick up a while that people talk about, but in the end, I don't think I picked this book up at the right like stage in my life. I just felt like a lot of the principles and quote habits he was talking about are, I don't know, things that either just didn't really apply to me right now, or they're things that I've already learned and picked up on my own, especially having been a Christian for actually most of my life, I guess. I feel like there are things I really just learned, from my faith and seeing the world through that lens. If you don't necessarily have a faith lens or whatnot, then maybe you will pick up more from this book, or again, depending on what stage of life you're in, I think there could be more that could resonate with you. And I think that's why, even though there are so many nonfiction books like this one that I personally haven't enjoyed, I try to never knock each one, because it can still be a very subjective reading experience with nonfiction books, or at least that's what I find. So again, there might be something in here for you, but in the end, this book just didn't end up sticking with me. And that wraps up everything that I read in May. I hope you guys enjoyed today's shorter wrap-up, and I'm curious to know if you also read any of these books, or let me know what other books that you read this past month. I'm always curious to know as a fellow reader myself, and I get inspiration from you guys as well, and what books to pick up next or put on my TBR. But before we go, I just wanted to add that if you are caught up with all of my episodes that are released as of now, you can also become a member on my Buy Me a Coffee platform and get access to early access episodes, which I upload every Friday. And so far, I have yet to miss a single Friday since I've started doing this, so that is something you will automatically get if you join my Buy Me a Coffee platform. I do also post other follow-up and bonus content on there, but those are a little more infrequent compared to the early access episodes. So yeah, if you're interested, the link is always in the show notes or description below for you guys to access and go and make a contribution. And again, your contribution does mean a lot to me for those who choose to do so, and it helps keep things going around here on the podcast. But with all that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you back here for episode 40. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.